Let's look at the Poser interface, and it's brand new. Basically, the entire interface has had a total overhaul, and it's much easier now to move things around on screen. People familiar with earlier versions of Poser will find the basic controls pretty much in the same place as before, but now the palettes are all dockable and undockable. There is a palette docking control square in the top right hand corner of each palette, which allows you to set the various controls to enable you to move the palettes around. They're very easily moved just by clicking on an empty area and then just moving the palette around exactly where you want it, and it can be returned to its original position. The main document window can be moved around as well, particularly handy if you're resizing it. But also a useful feature is the fact that some palettes can be moved completely out of the way to give you more real estate on other palettes, such as the new library here. It's much easier to find your content by moving the Morph palette out of the way, but that can easily be put back as well. This really has cleaned up the interface and lets you concentrate on your work rather than where your tools might be. But the interface can be customized as much as you want, and we'll cover that in a different chapter. This is another new feature for Poser 8. The morphing tool now allows you to morph across multiple body parts. I'll just do this very quickly on the Allison figure I've loaded here. And then these can all be combined into a new morph target on the Allison body settings. Just down the bottom here there will be a new custom morph setting which can be renamed. I'll just call that full body morph. And I'll just save that name. And when I now turn the dial, you can see that I have created body morphs across several of Allison's body parts. I've loaded a top view of Allison's forearm here to show another new feature of Poser 8, dependent parameters. You can use any existing parameter dial to create new master parameter dials, or any number of dependent or slave parameters. This lets you link morphs, deformers, transformations, or just about any other element in the scene to create complex interactions between body parts, such as muscle bulges. I've loaded Allison into the setup room here to show another new feature for Poser 8, improved rigging. The new rigging system allows for better bending of characters and features a new capsule-shaped fall-off zone that allows finer control in specifying how joints respond to rotation. I set up a scene with Allison to show another very new and important update to Poser, which is Indirect Lighting. I'll just start a render to show you what it's like. Indirect lighting will provide light that bounces light from other objects in your scene, so that reflected light from nearby surfaces will produce more photorealistic results by reflecting light color onto your figure. You also now have the possibility of controlling light fall off and attenuation. There are two new settings now, as well as constant, which Poser has always had, but is inverse linear and inverse square light attenuation, which will create far more realistic point and spotlights for your scene. I'll explain a lot more about this as well in another chapter. Another new feature for Poser 8 is tone mapping. This is useful for final images that will have a high dynamic range. I'll just open the render settings dialog box here. Tone mapping appears down here, and there are two flavors of tone mapping, exponential and HSV exponential. And when you click on the control, you can actually control the amount of exposure you want for your image as well. This kind of prevents the colors blowing out when you have strong lights in the scene, and it will help preserve as much information as possible from a high dynamic range source if you're using high dynamic range lighting sets. So I'll just render this image very quickly to show you the effects of that as well. And again, this is something else I'll cover when I talk more about outputting your images from Poser. Another new feature in Poser is support for normal maps, which is an image just wrapped around an object that works with the scene lighting to give the appearance of 3D on an otherwise smooth surface. And you can use this to emulate any kind of surface feature, from pores in skin to carved stone. In this case, I've just loaded a one-sided square to demonstrate the effect. I'll plug the image map back in, and then I'll just show you the effect with two different lighting effects. If I just come back into the render I did earlier, and I'll slide between two different lighting setups, and that is just a plain one-sided square with an image map emulating carved stone, and you can see how the lighting changes. Wardrobe Wizard is another new utility for Poser 8 to allow you to convert clothing models from one figure to another. I converted the clothing for the Sydney figure here to fit the Alison figure on the right. I'll just open up the Python script window to let you have a look at what the window looks like. Wardrobe Wizard control interface. There's listings here for most of the legacy figures included with Poser, and you can convert from one to the other. But it's also possible to obtain more figure setups from Phil C., the guy who actually wrote Wardrobe Wizard. It used to be available separately from Poser, but now it's actually built into the program, and later on I'll be showing you how to use Wardrobe Wizard with a little bit more detail to convert your clothing from one figure to another. Poser now has a new hierarchical library palette that allows you access to all of the content included with Poser and other content that you may possibly add yourself. It's fully searchable, all of the 9 library categories are now included, and this is possibly the biggest alteration that's been made to Poser that past Poser users will notice. You also have a Favorites tab which enables you to keep your most used assets in the right place, and later on I'll talk to you on how to maintain and edit your library and how to install new content. There is over 1 gig of new content included with Poser 8, including poses, props, hair sets, lights and cameras, and also an awful lot of new figures, including the new art school inspired lay figures, Andy and Andrea, and here are 2 of the new human figures, Alison and Ryan. There are also a lot of ethnic variations included for these 2 figures, so you have over 4 pairs of figures that you can play with. Here's the new Poser dog as well, and there are lots of new props such as the convertible car in the background. There are also a lot of minor performance optimizations in Poser now, including multi-processor support, which improves your posing and rendering. Cloth simulations are now a lot faster, and picking and pre-selecting items in the screen is now a lot more accurate as well. There's better support for multi-processor hardware, and it includes multi-processor support for better scalability when rendering in multiple buckets. And there's also an improved OpenGL preview, which I'm using right at the moment. You can display a lot more lights, up to 8 lights now, and bitmap support allows you to have better previews of textures, so you can have a better idea of what your complicated scenes will now look like.